Everyone, I'm SINCY SANTOSH from Bulwark Technologies. First of all, let me thank everyone for joining this webinar. Hope all of you are well and safe. Let us see what is on today's agenda. Welcome and introduction, Colonial Pipeline Hack, how to protect your organization with the Email Security 3.0. Before I hand over to Mr. Marcel, who is the speaker today from Mimecast, I would like to brief about our organization. Bulwark is a value-added distributor of information security solution, having 21 years of experience in Middle East. We work as an extended arm of our vendors, whom we represent in the region, promoting and selling the IT security products and solution. This webinar is part of our ongoing activities to support our existing Mimecast customers and partners to be updated with new features and strategic initiative of Mimecast. With this, let me welcome Mr. Marcel from Mimecast to take you through the product and answer your queries.
All right, perfect. As SINCY said, my name is Marcel. I've been with Mimecast for just a little bit over 6 years now. And I'll be conducting the webinar today. I think I'll probably have you guys for about 30 minutes. The main purpose of the webinar is for you guys to just have a look on how to achieve cyber resilience and stop disruption via things like the Colonial ransomware attack or disruption within the organization with the actual Mimecast solution framework. I know most of you on the call are resellers, so it will be a bit more tailored toward the resellers on this call as well. Just to give you a bit of an overview of Mimecast, I know we do this with most of our calls, but this is one of the latest ones. Just over 40,000 customers globally at the moment. Pretty cool, over 17 million end users that are protected. And if you guys know Mimecast, our big aim is to stop bad things from happening to good people. So it's great to see that we're protecting over 17 million end users with the Mimecast solution. Over 66 billion emails managed monthly. We were founded in 2003 and IPO'd in 2015. If you bought Mimecast stocks in the beginning of this year, you would be smiling now because it's grown quite a bit, which is good for the people that hold the Mimecast stocks. And then we've got 9 global offices with actually just under 2,000 staff at the moment, 16 data centers in 17 different countries. Now getting to the ransomware attack, where obviously ransomware strikes again via the ransomware group DarkSide. This is where they actually infiltrated Colonial Pipeline's systems, which then caused the shutdown that I would say not only had a national impact for the US citizens, but also global implications. The reason for this being is that it impacted thousands of, first of all, Americans, which led to things like gas shortages. But globally, it was a lot around economic uncertainty, panic for a lot of organizations as how can a large organization like this fall victim to ransomware? They actually went completely offline on the 7th of May. So that obviously caused quite a bit of panic. And then something quite interesting for me was an executive order from the White House, actually the president himself, regarding cybersecurity. And again, for us, this really does stress the importance of preventing ransomware from happening in the first place through strong email security tools and awareness training. But it is extremely important to have that backup and recovery. And these are all services that Mimecast do specialize in, and it really does talk directly to the cyber resilience piece we are covering today. Now, just to chat about this a little bit more, for many people, I think the image of an oil industry is one of like pipes and pumps or greasy black liquid like squirting out of the ground or the ocean. But in truth, the type of modern operation that the Colonial Pipeline runs is extremely digital, like most of our customers and resellers are today. So things like pressure sensors, thermostats, valves, and pumps, these are all used to monitor and control the flow of things like diesel, petrol, gas, jet fuels across hundreds and hundreds of miles of piping. Now, something that was really cool for me and quite interesting is that Colonial actually has a high-tech smart pig. So it's literally like a little robot pig that does pipeline inspection on like the pipeline, the gauges, etc. And basically what this robot does is it scurries through the pipes at Colonial and it checks for anomalies. So that was pretty cool as well. And no longer is it people that are actually looking at this, but connected robots really scurrying through the pipelines, looking at that as well. Now, all this operational technology is connected to a central system, like most organizations. And where there's connectivity, there's a risk of cyber attack. So hence, where there's a business, there's a risk of cyber attack. And all the devices used to run a modern pipeline are controlled by things like a modern organization are controlled by computers rather than being controlled physically by people. And you know, if they're connected to an organization's internal network and it gets hit by a cyber attack, then obviously it's the organization or the pipeline in this matter itself that is most vulnerable to those malicious attacks. So what did it actually do? Well, obviously, first of all, it was a massive ransomware attack that impacted the national pipeline, causing huge disruptions and economic uncertainty, fuel shortages, and panic across the entire country and the globe. Colonial actually suffered a reputational and financial damage, in addition to a $4.4 million ransomware payment. And Colonial actually worked with the assistance of the FBI. They paid the requested ransom back on the 6th of May. It was 75 Bitcoin, which back then actually accounted for $4.4 million. And the attackers actually sent Colonial the software application to restore their network immediately, right? But it took some time for them to get up and running. And actually, what happened, which I thought was quite interesting as well, was that DarkSide released a statement stating that they're not looking to disrupt the world, they're just looking to make money, as if that's okay, which is absolutely crazy. Thirdly, the success of this attack is likely to embolden other attackers all over the world, which will then obviously see further the prevalence of ransomware as they get more bold with the way that they attack organizations. And then, as I mentioned earlier, as well, the US president issues an executive order and rallies a cry to improve cybersecurity globally. Now, I mean, for the resellers on the call, I think something quite important for me is when you're speaking to customers or partners or prospects, or if you're a customer and you're speaking to your internal team or execs on this, I think it's really important to try and understand the strategy to combat ransomware. And if you do have any sort of backup or recovery plan in place in the event that you or they are attacked. Because again, first and foremost, we want to make sure that we are protecting organizations and we make sure that bad things aren't happening to good organizations or good people. Now, the fear and uncertainty and doubt around ransomware is definitely growing. And we do see these attacks continue to rise in frequency as well. And I think it's really important to just have a chat around our cyber resilience narrative, and also to demonstrate how Mimecast can help prevent these type of attacks from happening, but also showcase that if they do happen, we do have a backup plan and we can assist customers and organizations to get back up to speed as soon as possible. I will go down into a bit more depth in that as well. Now, to tie back into that, over the pandemic, we have seen the headlines talking about successful hacks stacking up, and we've definitely seen that the level of cyber threat has increased drastically. Now, globally, what we've seen is, and we've adopted technology in really an extraordinary fashion over the last 24 months with the pandemic. And a huge trend was for organizations to flock to cloud productivity platforms like M365 or Google, for instance. And the promise was that they were offering everything that we thought we needed. And despite the amazing technology, because let's be honest, it is amazing technology, we've seen successful hacks increase in scale, frequency, and unfortunately sophistication as well. So we have to ask ourselves, well, why is this happening in the first place? Well, there's an issue with expecting one organization to be everything to everyone, and the standardization of software stacks across the globe creates homogeneity and thus risk. And it's been clear for a long time that irrespective of the security improvements made by the likes of Google, Microsoft, attackers are proving themselves up to the challenge. And unfortunately, organizations are falling victim to the relentless attacks designed to target the data that is held in these platforms. Now, we've mentioned this so many times, but it still is relevant. And attackers still primarily send threats via email because it's easy, and because email remains the most universal communication tool. It still is the #1 threat vector by a huge margin. And again, you can see the relationship between the popularity of a tool and how much it is exploited in attacks. So what does an email threat look like? And this is basically the same where, for instance, it could have entered into Colonial in the same way. Is, well, broadly speaking, there's a huge volume of more basic, irritating sort of spam and opportunistic attacks. And in general, these tend to not be too disruptive on their own, but sadly, it just doesn't end over there. And coming in a much lower volume, we actually see advanced phishing and BEC attacks. And again, these can be devastating and incredibly hard to stop. And now we're talking about malicious URLs, attachments, ransomware, business email compromise, impersonation attacks, etc. as well. And what we've seen over the first sort of 100 days of the pandemic is we saw all types of email attacks increase in volume by at least 30%, right? So let's look at that actual attack chain. Now, first in the chain is fake phishing websites and domains and created by the hackers. And these are created to exploit trusted relationships by impersonating brands. Now, 85, and this is a crazy stat actually, is 85% of phishing sites have executed their intent within 15 hours of launch. And this brings me to a very important point, is that speed is critical for detection. So whatever tool you use, you have to make sure that they are up to date constantly. And secondly, we see email is the favorite the delivery mechanism, as I mentioned earlier. 94% of threats start with email, and unfortunately, 95% of breaches is traced back to human error. And users literally are constantly inviting malicious actors in by clicking on phishing links, opening attachments, entering credentials, and then lastly, falling for whaling or impersonation spoofing attempts. And then lastly, most organizations have experienced things like account takeover and the lateral spread of malicious content via email. And unfortunately, once the user actually executes the payload, the attack is underway, and the attack is underway, the dwell time or the attacker's ability to deliver on these last two stages increase drastically. And you'll see there over 71% of organizations report malicious internal emails, and over 50% of organizations that suffered an account takeover. And this is all part of the new Mimecast Intelligence State of Email Security report that we can share with you as well. And of course, their objective, be that ransomware, credential theft, or fraud, unfortunately define the scale of the damage that you suffer, or the organization suffers, or your customer suffers because of these attacks. Now, these attacks play out, or this attack chain plays out hundreds of times every day against your customers, against your organization, against organizations globally as well. And as we saw earlier, this is only getting worse as, first of all, the sophistication is getting higher, The threat impact is getting much higher, as shown by the attack we spoke about a little bit earlier, and the threat vector is not going away anytime soon. Now, only focusing on some of the links in the chain, like we discussed now, obviously does limit your detection efficacy, right? So if you only focus on before, only the delivery or the dwell time, it does limit your detection efficacy. And your ability to protect really does rely on maximizing your opportunities to break the attack chain proactively itself. So what does it mean for you as a reseller, customer, organization listening to the webinar today? Well, as a business owner or employee, you're trying to run a business, right? You're trying to provide a service, you're trying to make some cash, and hopefully you're trying to make the world a better place, right? You hire people, office space to run your business. You've implemented business processes, and those processes rely on many IT systems. These systems hopefully have been cleverly stitched together, and that includes things like websites, laptops, mobiles, email, cloud services, you name it, right? And then one day along comes Mr. Cyber Criminal, and that criminal unfortunately also wants to make some cash. The difference here is they don't particularly want to make the world a better place, and the cash they want to make is your hard-earned cash. Now, their aim and their sole aim is to disrupt your business and somehow extract your funds. Now, for decades, these cyber criminals have been attacking employees with viruses, with hidden malware, with malicious links, with ransomware, you name it, right? And every time you install a new level of protection, these poor old cyber criminals have to come up with a new type of attack. And those were things like, well, credential harvesting, sandbox evasion techniques, deep fakes, time bombs. I mean, you name it, you know. If it's not malware, they're just trying to scam you or trick you into paying a fake invoice using social engineering. And because of that, the focus really has shifted to beyond the perimeter as well. You've got all these clever tools to protect your employees, as we mentioned earlier, but your customers and third parties are a complete different story. You don't manage their IT, you don't manage their security, you don't have visibility. So what the attackers started doing is they started impersonating your brand and tricking your customers or supply chain to log into a fake portal, for instance, that looks like or similar to your website to get into your system or steal your money. And then they steal their money, your customers' money, or their personal details, and in turn, obviously damages your brand, unfortunately. Now, in the eyes of the regulator, it's often still your fault, and you could face hefty fines for these types of breaches. And what we have to remember as well is the regulator isn't trying to make the world an easier place to do business. That's not their place. Their place is just to make it a safer world, right? Now, what a lot of customers, resellers ask me is, well, what can I do to minimize the risk of being disrupted? Because, I mean, let's face it, there will always be disruptions. And on top of that, what can you do when disruption occurs? How can I mitigate disruption for my organization or my customers? And unfortunately, these threats are extremely clever, and they do come basically from every single corner. Now, what we have to remember is the hacker doesn't just sit there thinking, how can I launch an email-based attack? They think, oh, email's a good way in. A web is a great tool to get stolen data. Users can be easily tricked. Once I'm in, I can cause even more disruption if I play my cards right and hack a few more systems. So they've got a lot of tricks up their sleeve to be able to infiltrate into an organization. So what I always recommend is you shouldn't sit there thinking, well, okay, what email security or web security can I get that can fix all my issues? That's not the right way to think about it. I think the right way to think is you need to think, how can I avoid disruption for my customers as well as my organization? And first of all, you can do that by utilizing all your security solutions to the best of their capabilities. to make them to work together. So for instance, if I just blocked a thread in my email security, my firewall and my web security need to know about that as well, right? So they can work together. They need to be able to block the same threat essentially. And if I just find out a user was compromised in one system, I need to quarantine that user on all fronts to stop the insider threat from spreading internally into my organization. But I also need to hunt further for the risk with other users as well. And I think something really important is I need to be able to know who those users are. I need to enroll the affected or riskier users into something like an awareness training module, or to find out if they are still susceptible to similar threats and how they are affected by human error, for instance. And let's say, for instance, I just found out about a threat that exists against my customers on my brand. I need to be able to take action. I need to be able to warn customers through global threat intelligence, for instance. I need to make sure customers can block malicious emails sent on my behalf, but that was not by me. And I need to take malicious websites down quickly and effectively without the costly and timely sort of legal hassle around that as well. And the main reason is because the attack is live and attacking my customers or supply chain as we speak. And finally, if system disruption does occur, how can I make sure my user can continue to work, right? Do I have a secure failover system in place? How can I restore my systems and securely access independent backups or archives? And regardless of your vendors, you need to make sure your security solutions work as one ecosystem that can provide you with the necessary visibility and control across your network. So that brings me to the Mimecast solution framework. So let me show you how that looks, right? And the framework we're going to discuss today is based on the email security 3.0, the cyber resilience extensions, a connected ecosystem, and threat intelligence across the board as well. Now, firstly, we're going to touch at zone 1, and this is at your email perimeter. And this is your traditional layer of protection on keeping attacks out at the email gateway, basically. And this is a secure email gateway that protects against viruses and spam. Also target threat protection to protect against more advanced threats like malicious URLs, weaponized attachments, ransomware, etc. And then one that a lot of organizations are worried about is business email compromise or impersonations. Also important to note here is data loss protection, and this is to keep the regulator happy and to stop the leaking of sensitive data, either inbound or outbound in the organization. And you'll see when you speak about zone 2, there's a way to actually stop that from leaking internally as well. And then lastly over there is the browser isolation, which is a relatively new addition to Mimecast, and this is in place as an additional layer of security to protect against zero-day web attacks and credential harvesting within organizations themselves. Then if we move to zone 2, which is inside your network and your organization, this really is where we need to protect against insider threats, the lateral spread of malicious content, as well as human error. And Internal Email Protect allows you to detect compromised mailboxes, which are sending malicious content, and allows you to also detect internal data leak violations of sensitive or unethical content, as I mentioned earlier. The quarantine and remediation automates the cleanup of those mailboxes in your mail environment and also helps stop the spread of the content. Turbo is something quite new in Mimecast, and this is a managed service where your users or your customers' users can report suspicious emails to the Mimecast SOC team, the MSOC. Those mails are then automatically analyzed, triaged, and prioritized for expert analysts classification and remediated on your behalf. So we are managed service SOC. And CyberGraph, which is also something quite new and exciting in Mimecast. And the CyberGraph combines 3 key technologies to protect from targeted email threats. Things like the 3 are email tracker protection, a identity graph machine learning platform, as well as dynamic contextual banners, which are embedded within the emails themselves. And finally, making up the last part of the Zone 2 is the security awareness training, which in turn helps change the behavior within organizations themselves. And as we know, many attacks are extremely clever and very difficult to spot, even with a trained eye. And a change in behavior, or a change in behavior, however, can reduce the risk of insecure clicks and oversharing of sensitive data, or risky behavior, for instance, in like public places or end users opening or sharing attachments that they shouldn't be sharing. And this also includes things like advanced phishing, where we allow you to use a real live phishing email where you can reutilize it in a simulation to see if your users would fall for the same attack. Then finishing up the email security 3.0, we look at Zone 3, which is beyond your perimeter. And this is really protecting your customers and other third parties and your brand. You've got the ability to utilize the Mimecast Global Threat Intelligence. If something happened on the other side of the planet, you would know about that within seconds, basically, if you think of the threat intel. Really interesting for me on this is you can proactively hunt for risks against your customers coming from your brand, so outside of the perimeter, but you've got the visibility on that. And then once you've detected that threat, you can apply a level of brand or domain protection via things like DMARC or with DMARC Analyzer. And you can also stop the spoofing of your domain externally or take down malicious websites that are impersonating you. And then finally, I think very importantly as well is our API allows you to extend and integrate your email security with other security controls as well. And what we have to remember, and as we discussed a bit earlier, I think on the second or third slide, was email is the biggest attack vector. And because email is the biggest attack vector, it does provide you with a huge amount of telemetry, which you can embed into your ecosystem. And apart from the pre-built ecosystem integrations, you can also enable custom integrations depending on what services you use. And importantly, you can get more out of your existing security investments by making all of them work together, as I discussed earlier as well. And in turn, and pretty soon, you can also bring your own threat intelligence into Mimecast and the Mime OS platform itself. So finishing up, if we look at the wider Mimecast solutions framework, you'll see that the email security sits on the left-hand side, right? And this again is at your perimeter with Zone 1, inside and beyond your perimeter with Zone 2 and 3. But if we move over to the right-hand side, we also have the continuity and recovery. And here you can add 100% uptime SLA to your Office 365 email. And by doing this, you can avoid unnecessary downtime. But I think more importantly for me there as well is the sync and recover, where you have access to an independent copy of your data, which allows you to restore data back into Exchange with a cloud-to-cloud sync. And it doesn't matter what the reason is for your data loss, whether that be ransomware, deletion, malicious deletion, or by accident. Then to mitigate web threats and shadow IT, you can avoid the use of things like Dropbox, for instance, and other file sharing platforms by allowing users to send attachments or receive attachments up to 2 GB via email with Mimecast large file send. And with web security, you can apply things like acceptable web use policies, application control, and web security control on your devices. And it doesn't matter where the user is, if he's at the office, working from home, or on the road. You can apply those across the board. And obviously, with that integrating directly into your email security, it's a great benefit there as well. And then with the Mimecast privacy and encryption pack, you can send sensitive data to external users without it ending up in their inbox, where it's outside of your control with the Mimecast secure messaging. And you can also apply industry-specific content control like PSS, DSS control on credit card credentials, etc., with the privacy pack. And to comply with the regulators, you can look at having a mutable or independent archive with Mimecast. First of all, that provides you with fast and accurate e-discovery and case review applications. And the supervisory control can help you to tackle things like fraud, insider trading, etc. as well. And then finally, just to end up on, the framework is supported by, as I mentioned earlier, our global threat intelligence, which you can apply to all your Mimecast apps and other security vendors as well when you talk about the API integrations. You've got access to an open API and a massive alliance ecosystem with many pre-built integrations, whether that be like firewall, SIM, SOAR, endpoint, etc. But there's also extensive documentation on how to build your own integrations so that you can automate your security processes and also reduce the time to troubleshoot or remediate and hopefully to stay ahead of the adversaries. And then just the last slide before I end off is, I think very important is if you can maximize your opportunity to break the chain, as I discussed earlier, you can be sure that you can run your business in a secure and resilient way. Your customers, the regulator, the world basically can trust your brand because they know it's really you. And hopefully you, along with us, can continue to make the world a better place and hopefully make some money in that program.